Good afternoon, everyone. I pray everyone is having a great time at the 116th NAACP National Convention. We are blessed to be here today to talk about faith, activism, and social justice, for we are in a call for change. I'm Reverend Corine Mack, and this panel will have Dr. Wendell Anthony, who's the president of the Detroit NAACP branch, as well as Rabbi Judy Schindler, professor of Jewish Studies. I'm hoping that folks begin to think about questions they want to ask, because there will be an opportunity for you to also weigh in with your questions. So let's get started. Rabbi Judy and Reverend Wendell. Wendell Anthony.
Anthony's the last name.
Reverend Anthony. I'm used to saying your whole name. How have different faith communities historically contributed to social justice movements?
Yes.
In your opinion, yes.
Wants to go for it?
You want to start?
Well, I think there is no greater example of faith communities coming together than, of course, the historic Civil Rights Alliance. It was truly an interfaith alliance that had many legs of the journey that made great advances. I think the movement grew out of the Black church with Reverend Martin Luther King, just one individual, but there were countless pastors who opened their churches, preached sermons, held mass meetings at their churches, and really moved the movement forward alongside them. We had Malcolm X, who was with Nation of Islam and ultimately identified with Sunni Islam at the end, but he really brought forward the Muslim movement. And of course, we had so many Jewish leaders. Of all the whites who went down south to work for civil rights and advances, the majority were Jewish. So we had Jews marching in Selma, being jailed in St. Augustine. We had Jews really were with the Black community for much of the journey. So I think it serves as a model for what we can do today.
Brother Anthony?
Yeah, thanks. I don't disagree with what the rabbi was saying. I think that the marriage between faith communities has been very important. Martin Luther King Jr. exemplified that with a number of folk, not only with the church, but with labor, with a lot of entities. It's so essential that we who believe in God, regardless of what we call him, understand that he's a God of justice, of love, mercy, and empowerment. And it is through the coming together of the faith community that we were able to overcome so many obstacles, not only in the South, but in the North. I think of the bombing of the church in 1963, the 16th Street Baptist Church. Dr. King called Birmingham Bombingham, because at that time there were so many bombs going off at churches and other locations. But Reverend John Cross, who was the pastor at that time, he was preaching, getting ready to preach a sermon upstairs when the bomb went off. And the title of his sermon was A Rock That Would Not Roll, which meant that the church, the faith-based community, has to stand strong and not be moved no matter what comes against it. So the coming together, the symbiotic relationship between faith communities is very important, and particularly for such a time as this, to use that Ruthian Esther quote, this is no ordinary time. And if we've ever come together as a faith community, as labor, as youth, it's now.
Amen. And I love how you mentioned Esther, right? And what I loved about the civil rights movement is that the first time Rabbi Heschel met King at the Interfaith Conference in Chicago, Heschel opened the conference and used the liberation narrative and Amos as his core texts, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King closed the conference with those exact same texts. So we preach and we live and we believe in so many common scriptures.
I want to segue into my next question, which I think is apropos after the responses that I received from that first question. How do faith leaders balance the tension between traditional doctrine and the demands of modern social justice, and how things are ever changing today?
Well, that's the question of the hour. If you're in a church where the pastor, the preacher, or a synagogue with a rabbi, or a mosque where the imam never talks about the conditions in which we exist, you're in the wrong location. Dr. King talked about any religion that does not deal, is more concerned about the spiritual conditions and the God sense of where we are, and not concerned about the conditions of the earth that damn the soul, that corrupt the people, that defy our basic humanity, is a dry, dead religion in search of new blood. A lot of faith-based communities, unfortunately, are in search of new blood because we have failed to keep the fire burning. And that really is up to the people to encourage and to make certain that your church is on the case. I often say to my people that when we have service on Sunday, when we have classes Monday through Saturday, that's the church at worship. But when we're in the streets, when we're in the suites, when we're talking about policy, when we're talking about jobs and stuff out there to employ and to inspire our youth, that's the church at work. Faith without work is dead. And so you need both. You cannot have one. You got to have faith, but you also have to got work. Once you get through praying, you got to pick up your feet and start walking towards making the difference.
Love that. Rabbi Judy?
So I really had to look at this question. What is the tension between traditional doctrine and social justice issues? If you look at the Hebrew Bible, and you look at the New Testament, and you look at the Quran, there shouldn't be tension. Immigration issues, racial justice issues, economic justice, it's all rooted, and the humanity, the equality of all human beings, and the love of all human beings. So there really shouldn't be any tension between traditional doctrine and social justice issues, though there are some issues and some places in our sacred scriptures that were written thousands of years ago. And we know that law cannot exist if it is stagnant, right? Law is constantly evolving and changing. That's what the NAACP does, right? It challenges laws. And we go back to the daughters of Tzalafachad who couldn't inherit land. Their father died without sons, and they were daughters, and they went and protested. And the law changed. And so we know that some of the ancient scriptures, they were written for a different time and place. And when there is that tension, we need to negotiate the text and interpret the text in a new way.
And let me say on that same question, there really should not be a tension. There should be a complement between the Word of God, what Jesus did, what he lived and died for and resurrected for, and what we do today. The fact that let justice roll down like mighty waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, that's still relevant today because we need justice and we need righteousness. The fact that treat your neighbor like you want to be treated yourself, that's still relevant today. That welcome the strangers in because you might be courting angels, that's still relevant today. The fact that in order to be born, Jesus, Moses, had to make some moves in terms of being able to blossom and to express themselves wholly and holistically. I mean, as you know, Mary and Joseph were refugees. They had to leave their home. in order to find the kind of peace and commonality that we have. Now, we're being forced to leave our homes, and we're treating people who are different, unlike ourselves. We're treating them not with the love of God, but with the animus and the harshness and the callousness of Satan. And you got to call it for what it is. What we're seeing now in America is not righteousness. It has nothing to do with God. God would not be picking up people off the street and sending them to a nation that they don't have nothing to do with. God would not be sending folk to El Salvador and sending them to South Sudan. He would not be welcoming white South Afrikaners and at the same time keeping black Africans from Africa and from Haiti and from the Caribbean from coming into this nation. We're all equal in the sight of God. Every hair on your head is numbered. We all made just a little lower than the angels. And so God, being no respecter of person, cannot respect what's going on in America, calling itself the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's demonstrating anything and everything but that.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Reverend Dr. Anthony, because that has to go into the atmosphere. We all need to hear those words and be reminded of who God is, not who we are, but who God is and who we're supposed to be in him. Thank you for that.
I think we also need to think about what America is, right? America has been that nation of immigrants. That is what has made us so great.
Founded
so
in immigrants.
The concept of closing the doors behind us is a frightening concept to me.
Well, we know that spirit, as Dr. Anthony just spoke about, that spirit is not of God. That is of the enemy, right? It is of Satan. But here's the thing. While we're moving in an activist mind frame, we know that policy is always important, right? So my question to you is, can you give me examples where faith-based activism has led to significant policy or societal change? And there's quite a few.
Well, I think our greatest example in North Carolina, we've been part of a lot of campaigns together over the decades, but for me, one of the ones that gives me the most pride is our fight for marriage equality in North Carolina. So, first of all, a bunch of us as interfaith colleagues, we decided to take busloads of people to legalize their weddings in Washington when it wasn't legal in North Carolina. We made the news and we really changed the narrative, right? That's part of the piece, is standing up and doing what's right as clergy, and many of us officiated at same-sex unions long before it was legal. But in 2012, a law was passed in our state making it illegal, something we had done for a long time, officiate at same-sex unions. So what did we do? Well, we fought to not have this Amendment 1 passed. It was a legislative issue. It was voted on, actually. It was an election issue, and the North Carolina community sadly passed Amendment 1, barring marriage between same-sex couples. So what did we do as religious leaders? We led an interfaith coalition, and we filed a lawsuit arguing that North Carolina's statute that made it a crime to preside at and officiate at same-sex unions restricted religious freedom. We won that case. We won marriage equality in October 2014. Actually, 9 months before the country won marriage equality. So it was a great example of us working really hard with every tool that we had in our toolbox to right a painful wrong that our state had done in banning same-sex marriage.
Dr. Anthony?
Yeah, you can't really talk about policy changes that have had such a tremendous historic and current effect without Dr. King and what he did. He transferred and transformed the nation. Fair housing, integrating places where you could stay, bringing attention to economic development, Poor People's Campaign. That helped to inspire Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was president, to be able to do civil rights, to be able to do voting rights, to be able to do fair housing. Those were policy changes The fact that we had a president in Biden recently who eliminated as much as he could the debt of college students, who was and is a person who's been impacted, and he has said it, by the works of a Dr. King and by the works of others. So many ministers have come out of the church. Adam Clayton Powell up in New York, C.L. Franklin in Detroit, the fact that you have out of Atlanta, out of Ebenezer, the successor of Dr. King and others in terms of the senatorial rise and elevation of our dear brother there. So you cannot talk about that without talking about the church. When I see the young people, as they came in talking and chanting and marching, I want to say to everybody, because people talk about marching does not do anything. It does not elevate. Marching and protesting are demonstrations. They help to move towards the illustration of what is wrong. When the young people came in, many of us converged over there because we wanted to take pictures. We wanted to hear them and see them. That's the same thing that happened during the civil rights movement. People wanted to see it. They wanted pictures. It was on the news every night. It impacted the whole world. When George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, the pictures from that young woman who on her cell phone took those pictures of this guy with his knee on the neck of George Floyd went around the world. And as a result of that, there were demonstrations and illustrations of what needed to happen in terms of policies that need to be implemented in terms of diversity, in terms of inclusion. And a lot of companies pledged at that time that they were going to do something to be more inclusive. They were going to do more in terms of hiring. They're going to do more in terms of sensitivity. And now we see a reversal of all of that by virtue of this man that's in the White House, eliminating DEI. See, it's not DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We didn't come up with that name. They came up with that name. It's really WEI, white exclusivity and inclusion, which ain't got nothing to do with DEI. When you look at all the people that he done put around him, most of them, if not all, are unqualified to do the work that they are doing. That's policy. Elections have consequences. That's why we have to vote, because we set the policies through the people that we elect, and they elect for basically on our choice and our selection. And if you are not insisting that the people that you support, that you help to elect, if you don't insist that they follow what you are putting them there for, you need to recall them or not vote for them or select some other folk. Because it's not just about protesting, it's about policy. Policy makes a difference. And those people who preceded us focused on policy. Jesse focused on policy. King focused on policy. We have to focus on policy because that's where the difference lies.
Great response. Rabbi Judy, you have anything to add to that?
First of all, if we think about the most impactful faith activism, clearly, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And I think we can learn from all the tools they used to build coalitions. So, you talked about the photos and the protest and the storytelling and the narratives and the policy changes. I think we need many tools in our toolbox of social change, but we need to know where we are going. We need to have a very clear destination, and sometimes we're not always walking towards that destination. And sometimes when the protests start, in the middle, we've been through two significant protests together in 2016 with the death of murder of Keith Lamont Scott, and then again in 2020. And I think it's just hard when you're in the midst of the protest, to also have that clarity of what we're driving for. But there's the arts. There are so many important critical tools to achieve racial justice and social change. And I think we all need to use our gifts, right? What is our gift that we can use? And Elie Wiesel once came, the famous Holocaust author and survivor, he once came to Charlotte, and one of the pastors, he met with us, and one of the pastors said, there are so many issues of our world, what do we do? And he said to us as clergy, use our words. That's our gift, but we each need to use our gifts to bring about the change we yearn to see.
We know that in this country, over the course of the last 2 years specifically, there's been some devastating storms, all types of monsoons and hurricanes that has left communities at large at a great loss, causing displacement and further harm. My question to you is, how are environmental justice and climate activism being integrated into faith-based communities, as well as in your daily conversations with your congregants or those that you speak with?
Well, the biggest storm that has hit America is the storm that hit Washington in the last election with, unfortunately, Donald John Trump. That's a storm. That's been a tsunami to the degree that it is washing away and flooding the civil rights, human rights of our people. And as a result of that, agencies like the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, agencies like the Weather Service, emergency, agencies like FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Organization, they are being shuttered by this administration, which go to monitoring the storms, the earthquakes, the droughts, and all of that. It's important to note also that recently in Texas, with this flood that has resulted in the deaths of over 100 people, at least 120, 25 people, still a number of people are missing. You have to know, and they say they don't want to talk about what has caused it now. And the governor down there said, we don't want to talk about it because only cowards talk about things like that. We need to just focus in on how we can do better. Well, Governor, we know that's called CYA. And essentially that's what they're doing. Through the Biden administration, they provided $10.2 million to that county for the ability to put sirens up, the ability to do weather monitoring, and the ability to let people know when tornadoes were being hit. The people there, the county commissioners, who happen to be Republicans and who happen to be in the Christian right, said, we don't want this money because it comes from Washington. It comes from Joe Biden. And they equated him to Satan. And if they took money from him, it would be like taking money from Satan. It's on camera. When they had their meetings and they were testifying to their commissioners why they don't want the money, and as a result of them not taking the money, which could have prevented what happened there, you see what's going on in terms of this. So we have to not only monitor, we got to make sure we have the right people in office that's going to make sure it's being taken care of. I dread to think now with the elimination and the partial elimination of FEMA, and he wants to eliminate the whole thing, with them eliminating the organization that monitors the weather, with them dissing the organization that deals with environmental controls, the NAACP. We have a strong program on environmental justice, and we are dealing with that because in many communities, black and brown communities, we're the ones that are dealing with the leftovers, with the toxins, with the gases, and with the mess that's coming in our communities. I remember I was in South Africa a few years ago, and I was in a place called Kwalichi, right out of Soweto. And they had this big nuclear facility in which they were providing power to the white communities. The drainage from that big nuclear facility went into the black communities. Well, y'all, guess what? The drainage is still coming into our communities. We don't have to be in South Africa. We can be in North America. When you look at where the energy is going and where the waste is going, it's quite obvious. So we have to be very, very conscious on that question and in tune with those agencies that are going to monitor and make sure that we are not being dissed in terms of not receiving the benefit of what our tax dollars go to pay for.
So we're talking about faith communities and what congregations can do. And our community, Shalom Park, the Jewish community of Charlotte, we have a garden, which is very basic, but you get kids out there at a very young age learning, and the teachers are teaching environmental values that are grounding. Number two, I think this is the most pressing issue confronting our youth. I think they're deeply concerned about the environment, our college students and our teenagers, as they should be. They're going to face the greatest implications of our irresponsibility and our government's irresponsibility. But lastly, I think it's overwhelming to run a congregation, and the fact that we have amazing groups working on environmentalism and interfaith alliances to respond like Green Faith and like the NAACP, we should really use the resources we have to partner and advance. We can't take on every single issue as a congregation, but we can partner so that when our partners at Green Faith say, Rabbi Schindler, I need you at Senator Tillis's office this weekend, or I need you to sign on, or I need you to speak about it, that we can be there for our partners.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, what challenges do faith-based activists face when confronting systemic oppression, which includes misogyny, within their own institutions?
Well, I think there is a challenge within the institutions because a lot of our institutions are still with the old guard syndrome to the degree that they have not accepted the fact that Christ and the church is made up of more than just men. But if it were not for the sisters, the church possibly would not even exist. And so I salute them. But I think we have to get beyond that. You know, there's still a question of women in the pulpit in some cases. Christ did not make that distinction. And first at the graves, first to take care of his remains, the first to go tell his boys, his kitchen cabinet, hey, the master has done what he said. They weren't even there. So sisters had to go and tell him that. And so that's a problem that we have. But I think it's much better than it used to be. And so I think it's a question of education. It's a question of information. It's a question of encouragement. And if you're in a church where you paying tithes on Sunday morning, where you ushering and singing in the choir, where you steward boarding, while you trusting, while you working in the kitchen, you can also work in the pulpit. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And we need you. Because some brothers got it, but a bunch of them ain't. And so we need everybody. This thing is much bigger than any individual. It's going to require all of us to get on board this train heading towards freedom and democracy and equity.
When I think about patriarchy and when I think about white supremacy, I think we're living in very old structures, and they've really infiltrated all the systems in which we work and live. And so what does it take to overcome them when they are so deeply infused in our systems? And it takes those who are in power empowering those without power and being the ones to lead the way. And I want to give one example. I was ordained in '95. There weren't, I think that was the first year that was a woman leading 1,000+ congregation. Moved down to Charlotte. My senior rabbi was leaving, and I was hesitant. You know, did I have the skills? You don't know you have the skills to lead a extremely large congregation of 2,500 people till you're doing it. So 22 men put their hat in the ring, and I put my hat in the ring as well. And there was a lot of naysayers, right? And I tried to understand, well, why did they not want me to lead a large congregation? And I got 3 reasons. 1, I was a mother of small children. Number 2, I was short. And number 3, I was a woman. And those were like 3 things I could not change, unless, gender of changing surgery, which wasn't my thing. But what it took was a lot of people in power to push for me to get the job. And there's this one great story of a philanthropist. He was on the committee, a philanthropist, actually Alan Blumenthal. And his wife said when he went to vote that night on whether I would become senior rabbi, she said, if Rabbi Judy doesn't get the job, you're sleeping on the couch tonight. But it takes all those people in power pushing hard, and they mentored me, and they coached me, and they supported me, and enabled me to get to the position I got to. So it takes a lot to dismantle the structures we have. It takes coalitions of support.
It does. I'm going to ask one more question before we open it up to all of the guests here today. How can the younger generation within the faith community be encouraged to participate actively in social justice movements through your churches and your community?
I think you're seeing an example of that right here with the number of youth from all across the country who are here, participating in the AXO program, Afro-Cultural Technological Scientific Olympics, participating in our youth council. A number of them will be bringing resolutions to the floor when we have our plenary sessions. It's more than just participating at that level, but they're doing all of the things that the NAACP does. I can tell you from our church perspective, it's a church where young people are extremely welcome and invited. I think a number of churches do that, having programs for young people. Let them have their time. Let them do it their way. Sometimes we get in the way rather than let them do it their way. We got to remember somebody enabled us to do it our way, and we learn from that. They may stumble, but the stumble is not to fall. It's simply to move forward faster. And when they do that, you pick them up and let them go forward. So I think, particularly now, with the threat against HBCUs, the money being pulled back, all the things that we see now are going to impact them. They're going to have to face these judges that Trump is putting in office. They're going to have to face the deportations and the exploitation. Their health care is on the line. Their Social Security may be in jeopardy. So they need to know now what is coming for them later. I often say to young people, you are not the young people of tomorrow. You are the young people of today. And unless you deal with today, tomorrow for you will never arrive. And so we have to put them in place today so that they understand that they do have a place. And if they don't, then make a place for yourself. They're not going to give you anything. Sometimes you just have to go and get it. Folk waiting on their ship to come in, your ship ain't coming in. You got to swim out into the deep water and help your ship to come in. If you're waiting on the cavalry ain't coming. I'm looking at the cavalry sitting right here. We the cavalry. And we must protect our own interests as well as go out and help others to claim theirs.
Thank you. I think youth leadership and giving them programs in which they can shine as leaders and the support is critical. So in Charlotte, we run a Charlotte Racial Justice Consortium with multiple universities, and we train our university fellows. We run a Charlotte Black Jewish Alliance with young leaders and really give them the structure where they can fly and create change. We need to be where our youth are. We have this concept of a minyan. You need 10 people to have an official service. But if we stay inside our synagogue, we're really not expanding our work. So we need to go where youth are, whether it's Gay Pride or MLK Parade, or we need to be out there in the community. And lastly, I work for an organization called Spill the Honey. And we really, we have lots of documentary material, and an award-winning documentary on the Historic Civil Rights Alliance. And we go into schools with lesson plans and hip-hop pedagogy. We sing their songs and give them the tools to write their own songs to advance social change. So I think we need to do whatever we can to teach the youngest generation from the youngest of ages about what that civil rights partnership can create and achieve.
Very good points. I want to give everyone else an opportunity to ask questions. If you raise your hand, we'll call on you, and we want you to stand and ask your question of the panelists. Are there any questions? Please stand, love. We need a.
Can we
one
get a
second.
microphone
Let us
for
get a
her,
microphone
for the
for you.
audience?
Then we'll get one for you. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me? Oh.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Malia Walker. I'm currently a student at UNC Charlotte, and I have a question for Dr. Wendell. So do you feel like our churches talk enough about activism and social justice? As a person that do attend church and love going to church, I don't hear that as much. I only really hear conversations about do this so you don't go to hell and things like that. But, you know, where is that activism and where is that social justice conversation?
Thank you for that. And you asked me a question. So the answer from my spirit and my heart is no, they don't. Some of us are more heaven bound than earthly good. We want to get to heaven, but we don't want to do nothing on earth to make sure that our entry fee is being paid for. When we do make that transference, as transformation, God has nothing to judge us by other than what we have done here. How you have treated other folk, how you engaged in the struggle when people were starving or dying or being imprisoned unjustly. When you see something like George Floyd or Trayvon Martin or Breonna Taylor, and there's so many, I can't even enumerate them all, and you say nothing, and you wait until a week before a national election to tell your people to go out and vote. It's too late then. You should be discussing that all during the course of the year so your people are educated and in tune with what's getting ready to go down, so they're ready. You should have somebody in your church who's connected with social justice. If you can't do it, then appoint somebody in the church who's in charge of social justice, community concerns. You should have somebody who is your liaison between the NAACP and your church. The NAACP is the oldest, largest, and boldest civil rights organization in America. This is our 116th convention. We were born in 1909. Now, if you don't like the NAACP, okay, join SCLC. If you don't like SCLC, join the Urban League. You don't like the Urban League? Join the National Action Network. You don't like them? Join your labor union. You don't like that? Join your school PTA. You don't like that? Get involved with your church. You don't like that? Start your block club. You don't like that? Do something in your family. You don't like that? Start your own personal organization and we'll work with you. Now, if you can't do none of them things, you need to shut your mouth and sit right down, because all you're doing is talking loud, but you ain't doing nothing. We need everybody to do something.
Well, we don't have time for any of the questions, but I think that Reverend Dr. Wendell Anthony closed this down. He shut it down with that last response. At the end of the day, if you're not doing your part, because God has gifted us all, every one of us has been gifted by God for such a time as this. If you're not doing anything, shut your mouth. I like that. Listen, you. Every one of you, I want you to leave here, leave this convention energized, invigorated, and ready to work. That's the key. Okay? Thank you for this time, and God bless you all.
Amen.